Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining. We are expecting more people, but I think we should get started anyway. My name is Camilla Palestra, and I'm the Associate Curator at the Center for Sustainable Fashion. And I'm the curator of the Art for the Environment Conversation series at UAL. The series, which is organized with the postgraduate community at UAL, expand on the Art for the Environment Residency Programme launched in 2015 by Professor Lucy Orta, with the aim to explore environmental and social concerns that define the 21st century through art and design. And for those of you interested to know more about the program, we will put the link in the chat. So today I'm very pleased to be introducing our exceptional guests, Sarah Coulson, Meg Ellie, and Ellie Niblock. Sarah is curator and publications lead at Yorkshire Sculpture Park, working across all areas of the artistic program, including digital content. Most recently, she curated Saad Qureshi's first museum exhibition for YSP's Chapel. Sarah works closely with artists to produce publications and has managed the delivery of significant off-site projects, including Ursula von Reading's art at the 2015 Venice Biennale. She has an interest in poetry and recently working with Simon Armitage and Jackie Kay on commissioned poetry collections for YSP. Sarah is a trustee at Borders Sculpture Park, a Mellerstein house in the Scottish Borders, where she has curated large-scale site-specific projects. Meg is a sound and radio artist who has exhibited extensively in the UK and internationally, including YSP, the British Museum, Tate Britain, Whitechapel Gallery, Barbican, MACBA, Barcelona, to name a few. Her work, 3 Radio at YSP, was a finalist for the British Composer Award in Sonic Art 2016. Meg heads Radio Arts, having curated works for exhibition, broadcast, and led numerous hands-on workshops with the public in art spaces. A founder of London art station Resonance FM and Community Arts Radio in the UK, she is a senior lecturer at Contemporary Christ Church University in the School of Arts and Industries. And finally, Ellie is a multidisciplinary artist working primarily with sculpture, digital technologies, and installation. Her work is concerned with the exploration of unknowable places, and she's interested in exploring the possibility of how materiality and technologies can alter our perception of experiences. Ellie has participated in solo and group exhibitions across the UK, India, Latvia, and the US, including working with venues such as State Exchange and the Mark Rothko Centre. Her work is part of the Arts Council of Northern Ireland's permanent collection, and she holds an MA in Fine Art from Central St. Martin's. And before handing it over to our speakers, just a couple of housekeeping notes. You are muted. Please keep your mic and camera off for ensuring a better streaming. The conversation will be recorded and will be made available on the YouTube, on the Postgraduate Community YouTube channel. And we can share a link in the chat as well. The conversation will last approximately an hour, and after the presentations by our guest, there will be time for a Q&A, and you're welcome to put your questions using the chat box or also raising your hand and ask your question in person if you prefer. So now I will hand it over to Sarah for her presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Camilla, and I'll just load up my screen. So thanks for the invitation to speak today, and for the ongoing opportunity to be a partner in the Art for the Environment Residency Programme. A special thanks to Professor Lucy Orta, who's an artist that we've worked with at YSP on many occasions, and who obviously created this amazing residency programme. And the first slide on the screen here shows Lucy and Jorge Orta's Woodland Spirit Diana sculpture, which is currently sited at Yorkshire Sculpture Park, actually in the water of one of the lakes. And you can see this on this photograph, it's actually a resting place for a kingfisher as well. So what I'm going to do today is just talk about some of the work that YSP does that resonates with the themes of the Art for the Environment residency. As the UK's first permanent sculpture park, which launched in 1977, YSP's always explored ideas surrounding art, nature, landscape and environment. And obviously in today's world, these concerns and our responses to them have become ever more crucial. There are many different strands of activity occurring simultaneously at YSP. So today I'm just going to look at a few of them and touch on a number of kind of particularly relevant projects, although there are many, many more that I could mention. Excuse me. So first of all, I'm going to just look at probably the most obvious strand of work, which is citing sculpture across 500 acres of historic landscape. And this is across open rolling hills, in woodland, around lakes, informal gardens, punctuated by designed vistas and viewpoints, which are kind of come out of the 18th century landscape design. So walking through YSP, in a sense, is a curated journey, not only in terms of the artworks, but also in terms of the landscape. And although there are 80 works also on display at any one time, as you walk through the park, it's rare to be able to see more than 2 or 3 in your sightline at any one time. And works are carefully cited to draw out particular relationships with the landscape. And here you'll see a really beautiful work by Korean artist Kim Soo-ja, which is called A Needlewoman, and it's placed centrally in an open space within the landscape. And it really seems to kind of capture the light and the light qualities around it. It's coated with a special nanopolymer, which was created with scientists, and this particular material actually seems to enhance the refractive qualities of light. And if I move to the next slide, there's just a few examples here of some of the many works we have at the Sculpture Park at the moment. And works such as Ursula von Ryding's Damski Čepek here, which is a kind of a shelter, grotto-like work, which really resonates with elements of the 18th century landscape design, particularly a shell grotto that we have around the lakes. To see the whole of Yorkshire Sculpture Park is a real commitment of time and effort. As I said, it's a 500-acre landscape with many, many sculptures spread throughout the extent of that landscape. And so it really necessitates a kind of slowing down of the pace of everyday life. You really become aware of landscape, of weather, changing patterns of weather, temperature, sounds, smells, even the kind of emergence of different plant life through the seasons. So the arrival of snowdrops and bluebells, and you know, it's incredible to see this through you know, through the seasons. Sorry, I'm just hang on. And one of the interesting things about that is that it's very much kind of, it seems like minor details when you're considering the bigger picture of a climate crisis. But one of the things that we need to remember is the really significant issues that we face, and one of these is actually a breakdown in our connectedness to nature, in our understanding, our care for nature. And this breakdown makes us less likely to be invested in or care about the declining condition of the natural environment. And this disconnect exists even at a time when there's such plentiful evidence of the positive benefits of being in the open air to our physical and our mental health. And Miles Richardson, who's a professor of nature connectedness at the University of Derby and someone whom we're partnering with on an initiative called the Oak Project, which I'll mention later, says that research shows the power of arts-based, sensory and meaningful emotional-based activities in building a closer connection to nature. And a large part of YSP's activity in relation to art and the environment is intended to foster and to nurture our connections and reconnections with the natural world, to encourage understanding and care, paying close attention to our surroundings, and thereby opening our eyes to our wider impact on it. So in a sense, our role is seen as one of motivation to inspire public interest, attention, and then hopefully followed by subsequent action. We invite artists to respond across the programme, to consider YSP almost as a microcosm of the wider whole and look at its layers of both physical and social history, and to help us to reframe, to analyse and to interpret our world in myriad different ways. And another way in which this is done is through the temporary exhibitions programme, as well as having the open air galleries as such. We also have 6 indoor galleries where we display a changing programme, and many of the themes that we're dealing with as overarching themes in our programming really resonate with the Art for the Environment residency as well, including shelter, safe space, sustainability, human rights, and migration, amongst others. And our focus tends to shift between the local and the national and the international, considering how one affects the other. So in 2018-19, we presented a major exhibition of works by Giuseppe Pannoni, the Arte Povera artist, and trees are obviously one of the major things that artists link with at the park, as obviously the oldest living inhabitants of the landscape that we also inhabit. And trees are at the heart of Pannoni's practice, and his kind of thoughtful consideration of humanity's relationship with the natural world grew from his early investigations in the forests in Italy, and his affinity for the environment, careful use of natural materials, and presentation of the kind of the magic, the complexity of ideas such as growth, are ones which really invite audiences to look more closely again at the environment which they're surrounded with. And then move on again, as I said, we've worked with Lucy and Jorge Orta previously, and in 2013 they had an exhibition at our Longside Gallery, which is around the theme of water as both life giver and life destroyer, and amongst many other things they considered the inequalities of access to water across the globe and access to safe and clean water. Things such as plastic water bottles also featured predominantly in the sculptural work, which you can see on the work, particularly on the right hand side, the blue piece there. Which was relating to issues of recycling, but also the so-called garbage people in Cairo who carved out a precarious living by collecting and recycling refuse. And water was also a really important part of this newly commissioned work on the left here, the Raft of the Medusa, which was an assemblage of oil drums, oars, and wood, life buoys, piles of clothing, cast inflatables, some in the shape of dolphins, the kind of things that they're used to seeing kind of on the beach, on beach holidays. But some of these references were very much drawn out of the kind of prevalence in the news at that point, as it continues to be, of migrant vessels, of people making these precarious and, you know, life-threatening, life-destroying voyages to try to seek refuge and safety in other countries. And something that was happening particularly at this time was that we were seeing images which were often very dehumanizing, but also they showed that there were bodies in the sea at the same time as holidaymakers were still swimming and still playing on these inflatables in such close proximity. This was Common Ground, an exhibition in 2013, which presented the work of the Dorset-based arts and environmental charity, which is Common Ground, who focus very much on a kind of local approach. They have initiatives such as Apple Day and Parish Maps that focus on local distinctiveness and how we value the things that are distinctive and unique to our environments. And in drawing attention to them, that hopefully we pay more attention and put more effort into the preservation of these environments. And they often work with artists in terms of placemaking and drawing attention to place. And the image on the right is a project that they did with Assemble. So just quickly moving on now. Okay, so this is a work moving really from a local project that we've just looked at to very much an internationally focused project. And Alfredo Jarre is renowned as one of the most politically engaged practitioners working today, and presents us with some of the darkest and most pressing issues that we face: human rights abuses, genocide, refugee crisis, global imbalance of power. And this incredibly powerful work called The Garden of Good and Evil was made for his 2017 exhibition at the Park, and is now a permanent part of our collection, thanks to a donation by Apolitical, which is an organisation that promotes the work of artists who are working in a particularly socially engaged way with political and social concerns. And this work refers to CIA covert black sites, secret detention facilities used for interrogation of suspects. And here Jarre is using an area in the woodland at YSP and really kind of creating a disconcerting and unsettling experience within an otherwise peaceful landscape. And it's a really interesting kind of reversal of our view of a landscape as something which is pastoral and quite a neutral space. Just very quickly, this is our James Tyrell Deer Shelter Sky Space, which is one of the works which creates space for contemplation, creating spaces for simple observation of the natural world around us. Moving on to residencies now, which is particularly relevant to what we're talking about today, but residencies have been at the core of YSP activity since our very earliest days. And you can see here a residency with David Nash, and he lived and worked on site, as many artists do, and used the landscape as a laboratory, as a place to explore ideas. And often when artists are used to working in the kind of confines of a studio, having this whole 500-acre landscape to explore and to use and to kind of use as a way to kind of think through ideas, it really opens up a huge kind of new perspective. And at this point, David Nash was working with trees that on site that had Dutch elm disease, so therefore also looking at the ideas of imported diseases and threats to our native landscapes. Andy Goldsworthy was also resident in the very early days of his career, and it's interesting that these two artists were working very much with the kind of the kind of physical aspects of the landscape, so the real nuances of things like the changing colours of the leaves on site and things like that. And through time, it's interesting to note how artists have become much more interested actually in a kind of a scientific approach and working across disciplines. And Brandon Ballinger, who's a New York-based artist, biologist and environmental activist, was resident at the park in 2007 and 2008. And he set up a lab on site to study kind of mutations and deformities in amphibian life, as well as to study the insects on site. So this was very much working in a scientific way. He was looking at amphibians as eco-indicators whose health represented the state of the wider environment, and he was looking at how many were growing with kind of extra limbs and really strange kind of deformities in their growth. So this was very much a kind of a learning, research-based residency. And he also created the sculptural installation Love Motel, which was to attract insects at night time so they could be observed, but they also actually kind of painted on canvases inside this space on the right as they landed. So then moving on to Caroline Locke, who's another artist, and our residencies are very much kind of open-ended generally, and they're a space for thinking, questioning, investigating, and not always requiring a kind of fixed end result. So there is a great freedom to the way that artists can investigate whilst they're on site. And here we have interdisciplinary artist Caroline Locke, who again has worked at YSP on a number of occasions, and her work is very much about making the invisible visible, which I'm sure is something that Ellie will go on to talk about later. And increasingly she works with the natural world and collaborates with specialists from many different disciplines across science, environmentalists, arboriculturalists, musicians, to name just a few. She often translates collected data into artworks, working on the basis that the better informed we are about the natural environment around us, the more we can do to help and to take action to preserve it and to think about our decisions. And in this residency, she collected various forms of data to discover the frequency of trees. So she made scans, 3D scans and recordings, and translated them. Oh, sorry, just saying we need to move on to Magz. Sorry, we've taken up far too much time on the early part of that. So
do you want to wrap up, Sarah, before we move on to Meg?
Yeah, I'll just very quickly look at the projects which were undertaken by the second two sort of residents that we had with us. And Pat Naldi, who was looking in 2016 at the politics of landscape, hierarchies of view, socio-political constructions of views and the way we observe landscapes. And she ended up being very interested in the way that at night YSP became a very closed space, with even though the access has now been opened up to the public, that in the hours of darkness that actually it became a very much a kind of closed and protected space. And so she wanted to look at lighting the natural landscape in a way that kind of drew comparisons with an urban landscape. And then we have Gonzalo Bira, who was our resident in 2017, who was looking at organisational structures and ways of experiencing the park, and the way that even an open landscape like the park, which seems to have a very open method of interpretation, is actually constructing kind of very particular ways of viewing through mapping. And Gonzalo made these wonderful flagless poles, which were about refashioning structures of authority and removing their function by not having flags, and also skewing convention, seeing the park in a different way, and proposing what he described as a queer path. And so I think now
yes, I think we can move on to Meg also, who will talk about her project at YSP. Thank you so much, Sarah. I mean, such a wonderful setting, landscape, amazing project. I appreciate how difficult or impossible it is to condense everything in 10 minutes. But possibly, hopefully, we will have some time during the Q&A to go back to some of the projects and and discuss more about YSP. So, Meg, over to you now.
Okay, thank you. I found that really fascinating to hear from Sarah, and I'd really like to hear about all the other artists that have worked at the sculpture park. So maybe that can be a future talk that you can arrange, because it's really interesting to hear. Can you see my screen okay? I've just shared it, so you should be able to see.
Yes, we can see it now.
Yeah, so that's Sarah's talk's bringing back so many memories for me in 2015 at the sculpture park, which was the time I did my residency there, and I have to say it was hugely inspirational. My own work, I just finished my PhD at UAL at that time, actually, so it was a really nice way to tie up all the research work I've been doing around radio art. My PhD was called Radio After Radio, Redefining Radio Art in the Light of New Media Technology through Expanded Practice. And so I've been looking at 100 years of radio art and exploring different ways of making expanded radio art and our understanding of radio. And so for me, that was the kind of stepping stone between finishing my PhD and just carrying on with my practice, because in a way, I was just enjoying it so much I could just carry on forever, which is kind of what I'm doing now as an artist. So a lot of my work, I'm just going to give you a quick overview of my work. To begin with, I used a lot of ready-made. So for my early works, I was kind of using sort of multiple radios to broadcast sort of site-specific installations. And I realised from doing those that they weren't very eco, because at the end of the day, you need a lot of kit. You had to do a lot of recharging, or you use loads of batteries. So this kind of led me towards what I did later at the sculpture park. So this is a piece that I did as part of the Whitstable Biennale on the beach, broadcasting on the beach, a sort of site-specific work around sirens, and I got the local people to take part, and it was a participatory work, and got them to record what they thought a siren sounded like. And so I had quite a lot of fun with that. I'd done other pieces where for instance, Radio Mind, which again started off in a very small chapel-like building. It also ended up at the Lightworks Festival. Again, this was much more kind of radiophonic drama. It was based around it's based around pirate radio and this idea of spiritual radio. So I was going back to the 1920s, when people thought about radio as this kind of amazing invention that was kind of almost, inhuman and spiritual or magical in some way. So that piece kind of explored the different relationships between spiritualism and also this idea of radio as this new invention. So that was Radio Mind, which elements of this come back to me for the piece that I did at YSP, because it ties in with this man called Tavernier, who was a sort of spiritualist Anglican who lived in Canada and was using the radio to communicate through people, kind of like telecommunication, this idea. So he used lots of metaphors about radio and being able to speak to each other through our minds. And he also lived in a really beautiful part of Canada where there are quite amazing fir trees, and that was kind of one of the things that got me thinking about working in forests, actually. So another piece I did was called Radio Recall, again, which was where I got the public to donate radios and share their memories on radio. So quite a participatory piece, using lots, again, recycling radios from the 1950s to present day, ones that still had FM on them, basically. So I could broadcast my own works through them. So I used multiple transmitters and broadcast them through the radios in the gallery. Then I started thinking about actually making radio, so not just using radios as ready-made, but actually building transmitters myself. So the first, my original idea was to do it on trees, but before I got, as ever as an artist, it takes a while to actually get to the thing you want to do. You try out different things. So the first way into this was I made a spiritual radio, which I made a broadcasting book, and I used the whole of Tavernier's book to broadcast itself, and and hammered the transmitter into the book, and it worked really well. So I then kind of started experimenting with putting it on different places. So I had to go at putting them on pots, and this was a workshop I did at the Turner Contemporary, where I got ceramic pots made, and then got people taught people how to solder the transmitters together, and then record their dreams and then broadcast their dreams. So that was Dream Vessels. And this takes me up to the YSP, where I really still wanted to do this with trees and put transmitters on trees so that we could kind of hear, what the trees was, give trees a voice. And if you can see this picture in front of you, this is General Owen Squire, who was an American Army general, and it's a fantastic photograph, and it was kind of the inspiration for me reading about his work and how they used basically trees as antenna for radio. So you were picking up radio signals through the trees, using them as huge aerials. And so I thought about how I could play with that and actually make them into transmitters, because when you're building a transmitter, you often use what they call breadboards, where you hammer. The original ones in the 1940s, you're hammering into wooden blocks. So I thought, why not hammer a transmitter straight into a tree? And that's how I came up with tree radio. So this is a picture of the one at Sculpture Park, and I hammered it straight into the tree. I had to use, obviously normally I'd use copper pins, but I couldn't do that because that could harm the tree. So I was using plastic pins, and then built the transmitter, and then started thinking about the aesthetics of what the actual transmitter looked like. So I got to a very primitive stage with it, where it kind of made it as simple as possible, so that it could broadcast the work. So I'm going to show you a quick film of it in action, actually. So I just go into the film here. So this will give you a better idea. And so basically, when I was at the Sculpture Park, I basically wanted it to be solar powered. I only had 2 weeks there, which is a very short time to get this whole thing up and running. It was an idea I had, and it was definitely an experiment, so I had no idea if it would actually work in practice, and it did, so that was fantastic. I was inspired by Namjoon Park, who said that someday artists will work with capacitors, resistors, and semiconductors, as they do with brushes, violins, and junk. So I kind of, took that as an ethos for my work. And I've written about it in a journal called Reflections on Process of Sound, if you want to know more about that. And this is my website, where you can link to download that paper if you're interested to know more about the project. But basically, I basically got transmitters. I built the transmitter, and this thing you can see here is actually a probe which allowed me to listen to the sound of water within the tree. And I worked with another artist to make the probes, because I built the transmitter and Anthony Elliott built the probes for me. And then I got solar power. I set up sort of solar power solar power in the trees, so that it could be solar powered. So I had a probe listening to probes listening to the tree's reaction to sound, and also probes picking up light on the tree. So as the day happened, different sounds would happen. So to give you an idea of what it sounded like, I'll play you a little film that I made at the time. So put it on full size. And also the sound was very, the idea behind the sound of this is that a lot of generative art, a lot of sound-based art about trees, always has a very beautiful kind of, I would say, ambient sound to it. This idea that you're having some sort of meditational moment. And there's lots of work that people make using Magz MSPs, and it's always a kind of spiritual or kind of uplifting experience, and what's called and what I call muzak. And it's interesting that General Owen Squire actually invented the muzak. Not only did he do broadcasting through trees, he invented elevator music that became known as muzak. So I kind of wanted to go the opposite way, because obviously I was transmitting with the trees rather than picking up radio, and I wanted it to be quite raw. So this is the sounds you'll hear aren't at all aesthetic. It's just the the basic sounds that you get from the capacitors and resistors, which I find it to be very beautiful objects in their own right. Okay, so that gives you an idea of what it sounded like. It wasn't aesthetic at all, but the idea was that you'll be picking up, the tree is broadcasting constantly, and you could pick it up on an FM radio, or if you had one on your phone. So you wouldn't interact, the sound wouldn't affect the countryside at all. It's just that if the listener wanted to tune into, listen to it. So that was kind of that piece in a nutshell. And then I was asked to do another piece after this, also regarding using the same technology, because when I was working at YSP, to test it, I worked on some huge pieces of wood, quite similar to this one, probably twice as big actually. And they were quite sculptural in themselves, and I got asked to take part in a project about ash dieback. So this is a piece of ash dieback where I've hammered a transmitter and I made a piece to do with ash dieback. In fact, it's caused by tiny little fungus-like spores that fly through the air and then, you know, kill off the tree. And so this piece of transmission of spores, which I made back in 2018, and played with that theme and this idea of light radio. It's carried through the wind, but it's also very resilient. Even though we have ash dieback in the UK, ash seems to be fighting back really well. And I have an actual problem where I live, where ash trees are always propagating and trying to take over. So this is a very short clip. It's just 46 seconds of the broadcast I made by cutting up sort of scientific explanations of ash dieback to make a kind of broadcast that people again could hear in the gallery around ash dieback.
Established ash ground flora perpetuate intensity and below ground canopy light. Canopy light, intensity and canopy light.
Okay, so hopefully that gives you an idea. I'm sure that I'm probably running over time.
Yes, Magz, sorry. In fact, we should move on to Ellie's presentation. Do you want to conclude?
Yes, certainly. Yeah, sorry about taking a bit longer. I think that's the trouble when you have a really big PowerPoint. You have too much to say. Yes, so coming back to that, I then got straight after doing the YSP, I was commissioned to take part in the Woodwood Open, Woodwood Open, which is about working outside again, and I was thinking about whispering trees and broadcasting through ready-mades and listening back to them in a sort of listening space. I had quite a lot of fun making a dream space, which I've kind of taken to different places. And again, radio is kind of, to me, the most ecological way of sharing sound works. And clearly in this time of COVID, radio art is certainly something people should be experimenting with and are actually. So I will finish there, but hopefully if people got questions, I'm very happy to discuss this later.
Thank you, Meg. Very fascinating. And we put also the link to your website and to your AER report. I have this unpleasant role to keep the time. So I will move straight to Ellie and then we rejoin for a Q&A. Ellie, over to you.
Hey everyone, thank you so much, Camilla, and thank you, Sarah and Magz. What interesting conversations there, really inspiring. I'm just going to share my PDF. Can everyone see it okay? So yeah, my name is Ellie Niblock and I am an artist from Northern Ireland. I live and work in London. I've just finished my MA Fine Art at Central St Martin's in 2020. So I graduated in, yes, the pandemic. So yeah, 2020 grad. But since then, I've just been kind of working, home in my studio and trying to continue working. And then obviously I was awarded the residency to Yorkshire Sculpture Park, which I'm so excited about. I still am. So I found out probably almost a year ago. And I've kind of been thinking about my proposal in more detail and thinking about how I can kind of prepare for that. I'm really excited to actually get to Yorkshire Sculpture Park and just be somewhere physical, instead of being just in my room. So yeah, I can't wait. But this is, I'll tell you a bit about what I do. This is, I'm kind of, sculpture and digital art. So I kind of work across both disciplines simultaneously, and they do kind of overlap quite often as well, which is something quite recent. So this piece here is, it's like a 3D world. So I use like development software to create it. And this piece is an actual physical sculpture, but I 3D scanned it, so it is now a 3D model, which is something that it's a kind of a process that I'm starting to do quite a lot. And this is a sculpture, like sculpture on perspex. So I try to keep the aesthetic quite similar, and well, it kind of naturally happens anyway. But yeah, so I'll show you a bit of my sculpture work, kind of from 2017 to 2019. I took part in a artist in residence programme in 2017 with Electric Picnic Festival. It's a festival in Ireland, and I created a 10-metre installation type piece of work, and I hung 400 sculptures on clear wire outside on the art trail, and it was really about, I guess I had just previously came back from a residency to India, and what really struck me about that residency was the people that I met and the amazing conversations that I had with people. And sometimes, language was a bit of a barrier, and we sort of used body language and, eye contact to kind of communicate, and I was really struck by that. And a lot of my work is sort of about making something intangible tangible, and I kind of took those experiences into that piece. And another piece I did in 2019 was the Dream Sensory Machine, and it was a sculpture that I hung in a gallery, but I really wanted it to be immersive and kind of experiential. So I made this piece here, and people could stand inside it, and they could kind of look inside and listen to the soundscape. So it was quite an interactive piece, and I think that's something that I will continue to do and continuously develop it. Also, another important part of my practice is to kind of reuse and repurpose pieces. So in the Electric Picnic installation, I reused some of the sculptures, so they're really, really small, and I kind of included them in other works. So that's something that I tend to do quite a lot as well, is to combine different works together, so that I'm kind of just thinking about the amount of waste that I'm using and trying to keep that to a minimal. It's definitely something that I've been thinking about recently as well, and making more of an effort to kind of bring our lifestyle, we recycle and reuse things in our day-to-day lives, and I'm making more of an effort to kind of do that in the studio as well. So in saying that, I recently have been really developing sort of digital side of my practice. This piece is something I've just finished actually for a charity in Northern Ireland called Wheelworks, and this piece is a virtual space that you can go online and sort of navigate through the virtual space. And I think actually it's like I've created it and added a lot of sort of things that I'm missing at the minute. I was working on it from my bedroom, and there's no people in this space, and it kind of does, I think subconsciously it's just reflected like lockdown and all of that. And I think as well it's really important for me to kind of try and think of ways that I can combine the digital technologies and sculpture to make it more of an experience for the viewer. I think that's kind of what I'm invested in myself when I'm looking at artwork, so that's what I'm striving to do. And for the Yorkshire Sculpture Park proposal, I'm really excited to go there and experiment, and I want to create an augmented reality piece, just inspired by the ideas that I use in my practice anyway. And also I just want to get there and explore the grounds. Like I can't wait to walk around and see what's in front of me. I really can't wait for that, to be in fresh air, and just being somewhere physical I think is going to be really helpful. And in my proposal I suggested that I wanted to visualize the invisible. So I'm thinking of, of particle and how human activity is such a beautiful and grotesque idea simultaneously, you know, what we're doing to the planet. And I think it's to be able to see the, you know, the particles in the air with the naked eye would be incredible. And I'm kind of thinking about that idea for the piece, and I would love to make a film of a walkthrough of the grounds, but you can see, you know, sculptures mutating and pulsing, and to be able to see something really vibrant and beautiful, with also that kind of message behind it. So yeah, I've just been really the past few months just experimenting with augmented reality. These are 3 face filters that I've created for, I think I use Spark AR, which is like really easy software to use to make filters. But I think especially the geolocation filter, which is the one in the middle, I'd love to expand on that idea for the park, and I'm really excited to do that. So yeah, wrap up there. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening.
Thank you, Ellie. Thank you so much. It was very interesting to know more about your practice and to know more about your proposed project for the YSP. And it's really interesting to see how different practices, different media can find a nurturing space at the YSP. So I will ask Meg, Ellie and Sarah to rejoin for the Q&A, and ask our attendees if they have any questions to use the chat box, or or to raise their hands and ask the questions in person as well. We have 10 minutes left. And while we wait, I was curious, Ellie, to know, because you proposed your project for YSP, was it in 2020? It was pre-COVID. So how much the experience of the global pandemic, which has affected our practices, our life, our ways of working, do you think has impacted also your projects? Which are you envisioning any changes you would like to include to the proposal? Is there any development?
Yeah, I think so I went for the proposal. I think it was before the pandemic. It's kind of funny now to be living in it's a bit of a different world, but I mean, I think I've got a lot of experience now just working since pandemic, you know, and also I'm just like reminiscing on residencies. So I think a combination will be. I think I have many ideas. Yeah, I think my signal's really bad. It keeps turning off. Can you see?
Yes, you're breaking up a bit.
Yeah, it's really bad. But yeah, like combining my kind of physical sculpture practice with digital will be really exciting.
Thank you. There is a question from Anna, who asked, Meg, how much did you know about recording before you started?
I did know a lot, actually. I've kind of been doing sound art for quite a long time, since 2000. So by that, so since 1999 kind of. So yeah, I did know a lot about recording in terms of recording sound. In terms of building transmitters, I started doing that in a sort of just a couple of years before I went to YSP. So that was quite a new skill for me, building the transmitters. If that helps.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you. And Lucy is asking, Sarah, to know more about the collaborative research you'll be conducting with the Uni of Derby.
Yeah, that's actually part of a new project called the Oak Project, which is a collaboration between YSP, the University of Derby, who obviously have the kind of the specialism in nature connectedness, and also an organisation called the Bronze Oak Project. And it's going to involve artist commissions, and they're hoping to reach a huge number of people through these artist commissions, which are drawing attention to issues in nature and the climate, and to actually motivate public action. That's very much the kind of driving force behind it. So the first outcome of that for us is a new work by Studio Morrison, which is going to launch slightly later this year, and it's a work which has been developed, which is called Silence, and it's a new space in the open air. It's a kind of circular structure which is using natural materials, including timber and thatch for a roof, and it's a space which is about silence. It's about a place for people to kind of have a focus, to be and sit in nature, to consider their surroundings, and there'll be programming around this as well. So this is the kind of the first outcome of this new partnership, but it's something that will continue to grow and to draw attention to a lot of the issues that we've been talking about today.
Yes, and Meg, there's a follow-up question. Fantastic. You saw the question from Anna, and Lelia is asking you, Sarah, if there are any ways to get involved in residencies, YSP, in addition to the Art for the Environment programme.
Yeah, I mean, the kind of formalised residency programmes that we have are currently kind of graduate residencies. So we have a Yorkshire award, which is for people studying in Yorkshire, and there's also the Art for the Environment Residency, and we also work with the RCA as well. And but other than that, our residency programme isn't really a formal one. We tend to get in touch with artists get in touch with us about ideas, and it's a very flexible programme, and so we do tend to approach artists a lot, and invite them to come and spend time at the park if they're working in a way which really kind of resonates with the ideas that we're working with. And we, as I said, we have a house on site, so people can actually kind of stay and live in the middle of the sculpture park and just use that space to explore, to think in different ways, and to have the expertise of the curators, technicians, and there are a huge number of people working in different ways in the park. As you can imagine, it's not a traditional gallery space, so we found that a lot of the artists that we work with also spend a lot of time talking to and working with our estate staff, the gardeners, the people who have these huge specialisms in the natural world as part of the park as well. So yeah, I mean, it's very much a kind of an open residency format.
Are you reopening your spaces now, Sarah? How is it? How is your roadmap to fully functioning?
Yeah, we're beginning to. During this last lockdown, the park's grounds have been open, and obviously people are really acknowledging the importance of being able to escape to a safe space in the open air, to be able to have fresh air, and to be in enough space to be distanced from people. And luckily, in this last lockdown, we've been able to do that and have the grounds open so people can still experience the sculptures, but the galleries and all our other spaces have been closed, but they will start to reopen according to the roadmap. So the first gallery will reopen on the 18th, and then there's a staggered reopening from then on, which we're really looking forward to.
I have to say, I'm really looking forward to, I'm hoping to come and visit Sculpture Park this year. It's one of those places that's perfect for COVID. Visiting art outside is just the perfect thing, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there any other question? We have a couple of minutes left, really. Or anything any of you, Sarah, Meg, and Ellie wants to add? Didn't have the time to do it. I mean, we have 2 minutes, but if there's anything you want to add or ask.
Hi, Ellie. Just a quick question. When you're working, what do you start with? Do you start with
taking photographs, drawing, digital, or sort of making? What do you have a normal kind of way of starting when you start a new project?
I think I always kind of have an idea first. I mean, a really rough idea in my head. Sometimes, you know, it'll come at, you know, at any random time, as a lot of artists experience. And then I go straight to the studio and just play, you know, with sculpture and I kind of like work small scale. But because I feel like I'm more naturally happy working when I'm, you know, working with my hands and in like a messy studio environment, and I feel that my process at the beginning of a project is very free and experimental, and I find that it's, you know, sometimes if I'm in a mood to like work in a clean way, then I'll just go to my laptop and do a bit of 3D modeling. So it's good to have both depending on my mood.
Thank you. That was really
Thank you.
Thanks.
And there's a question from Melinda, which is to everyone really, why do you think we have so few sculpture parks in the UK?
Well, the sculpture park near me in Kent was, after 15 years, lost its funding, which is really shocking. And I think now that we've had COVID, it's a good sign that hopefully the funders will embrace more places like the sculpture park, because in the south of England we're really poorly served. So that's my 2p on that.
Thank you. So funding issues, as often.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, I mean, working with sculpture in the open air is quite a specialised thing as well. Working with artists who are creating work for the open air, the size, the scale, things like the costs involved in siting and moving things as well can be, you know, quite prohibitive in a sense, I guess, as well. And just that access to the space and the resources and the infrastructure. And the sculpture park, Yorkshire Sculpture Park, grew incredibly slowly. I mean, we began in 1977, but that was just with one exhibition of loaned works. There were no staff. There was no kind of building. There was nothing. It was the grounds of Bretton Hall College, and so it's been a really slow evolution to get to where we are now. Over the past 40 years, you know, we've grown very, very slowly. So, you know, it's a slow process, or can be.
Thank you. Hopefully, as Magz says, with you know, with the pandemic and the new limitations, we will rethink about how we use our outdoor spaces and how we can experience art in our outdoor spaces. And Lucy's adding in the chat that, yeah, commissioning outdoors work takes a long time and permits, health, safety, and so on. Risk assessing. So yeah. Nonetheless, as you was saying, it was a space that, you know, it was the open galleries that you managed to keep open to the public during the last COVID year. So it's really worth exploring the possibilities of outdoor art more and more. And yeah, I'm afraid we have to conclude here. I just wanted to thank again Sarah, Meg, Ellie for joining us. Thank you everyone for your questions. Thank you, Rachel, for putting links into the chat. I think you put also the link to the conversation series. I hope you can all join us on the 12th of May for the next event with the director of the Fondazione Berengo in Murano in Venice, Noemi Niederhauser and Cohen van Machelen. So hopefully I'll see you all on the 12th of May. Thank you so much.